Welcome to the Power Lunch live on LinkedIn. I'm Rhett Power, your host. We do this program every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and most Fridays around 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on LinkedIn's new live platform, LinkedIn Live. The point of the show is to talk to today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, corporate leaders about their secrets to success and the habits that they have that can all make us better, the things that they do in their businesses that we can learn from. Now, the fun part about the show is that it's interactive and we can take questions from you. So make sure you ask and engage with our guests. That's why they're here. They're here so we can learn. So ask questions. We welcome that. Now, we're simulcasting on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube with the help of Social Live, which is helping make all of this possible. Now, if you like the program, give it a like or share so that everybody in your network can benefit from our guest. Now, my promise to you is always to bring you the very best guest. Today, we've done that. We've got Kevin Eikenberry. Kevin is a world-renowned leadership expert. He's the founder of the Kevin Eikenberry Group. He's a best-selling author, speaker, consultant, trainer. He's been named twice the top 100 leadership management experts in the world by Inc. magazine. He's author of two great bestsellers, Remarkable Leadership and From Bud to Boss. And he's host of the Remarkable Leadership podcast. And there he brought props. Oh, my man, he brought props.
Why not? They were down the hall. All I had to do was go grab them, right?
That's where you went off to. Okay. Kevin, thanks for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
The power lunch, that's a pretty powerful, hey, I'm having a power lunch with Rhett today.
You know who did that? You know who did that to me? I called it lunchtime live, and I was on a interview with David Breyer. I don't know if you know David, and David's this genius marketing guy, and David said, we got to name it the Power Lunch. LinkedIn lunchtime on LinkedIn, or it was too weak, so we changed it, and we had on the moment, on the spot coaching and consulting. So
often when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? That's not mine. I can repeat the statement, but it's not mine. So originally.
Man, you're everywhere. You're out there. You've got. You work on a couple more books. Your content is fantastic, and the show is fantastic. If I do say so myself, since I've been on it, and
exactly, yeah.
But no, it's a great show, great podcast. You've been out there for the company's 25 years now.
Heading toward 26, yeah.
Jeez, man. So what is something we don't know about Kevin that's not out there? What's something that's new information about Kevin?
New information. Well, there's unusual things, but we've tried to do a pretty good job of making those really unusual things known, like the fact that I collect antique tractors and all that sort of thing. How about this? Known to some, but not known super broadly. I own, with my sister, I own the farm that I grew up on. And 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, my son and his future wife said, we'd like to get married at the farm, which is 320 miles from where I am now in Indianapolis. And so we redid a 110 plus year old barn to host a wedding reception. How about that?
That's awesome. When is it? This summer?
It already happened. It happened. We've now had another wedding there. It's already happened. No, but they had made that decision, and from November until that following July, we did everything to have that ready. We redid a floor. We put a bathroom in a 100-year-old barn. How about that?
Well, now you have a venue. Now you have a venue you can use.
We have a venue. Lots of people think I ought to use it for more than our own purposes, but there's only been there's their wedding and one other wedding reception been there so far.
Well, that's awesome, man. That's cool that you've kept the family farm too. I think that's really fascinating. Do you want to retire out there?
My wife and I have bought additional property that adjoins to one of the farms that eventually we will have a house there near Scottville, Michigan. For anyone who's watching that wants to know where that is, Scottville, Michigan is Kevin's hometown.
All right. Fantastic. Well, this is all interesting, but people want to know. They want to pick
no, what they're saying, Rhett, is can you get on with it?
Can you move on?
With the personal interest stuff. It's like the people that watch the Olympics and are tired of all the personal interest stories. They want to watch the sports. People want to get to the leadership stuff, Rhett. So let's do that.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir. Aye, Captain.
I guess I got to remember that you're the host and not me. I'm sorry about that.
Hey, man, you can flip the script. That's okay. I'm still learning this thing. You're a pro, so I can be in school. I'm good. I'm good with that. What is we talk a lot about now getting to know your people that you manage or that you lead, getting to know them personally, so that they're personal connections and you understand them and they understand you and you can communicate effectively. Do you see that is the right way to go about leadership, and how do you manage when you do have to manage those people that you're trying to also get to know and understand and be friends with to a degree? Are these? I know when I was coming up as a young manager, my managers always said, "Oh, you've got to have this line, and there's got to be this distance." And what's your take on all that?
Well, so let's start with that word "friend," because not everyone. If I ask people in a workshop, can you be friends with the people that you lead? You get hands on both sides of that equation, both sides of that answer. But then I always say, well, that's an unfair question because not everyone has the same definition of what a friend is. Some people say I got one close friend. Other people say, well, the last time I checked, I had 632 friends on Facebook, and neither one is wrong, right? So I think that the thing is, let's start by not framing it as friend. Let's start by framing it, as you said, framing it as building a relationship or a working relationship. Here's the thing. People want to be led by people that they know, like, and trust. It doesn't say be friends with. Right now, can it evolve to being a friend? Possibly. Can you lead people that are your friends? I believe the answer is yes, you can. Should that be your goal? No.
Okay.
The goal should be to be friendly. The goal should be to be likable, not to be liked, right? To be friendly, not to be a friend or to make a friend, right? That's not the job. It's not our job as a leader is to try to, new chance for me to make some new friends. That's not the goal, but we should build strong working relationships. I think a key word here is find connection or find relatedness.
Okay.
Right? Because the relationship becomes the foundation upon which we can build trust, upon which we can build easier and more effective communication and all those other sorts of things. So if you're now going to be leading someone that you are already a friend with, right? Or if the relationship develops into a closer one, then I think what has to happen is we have to have really clear expectations about where the boundaries are and where we're going to, what's in and what's out and all those sorts of things. So I'll start there. You can ask follow-up questions if you want. I think the big key here is the goal is not to make a friend. It's to be friendly. The goal is really to build a connection and a sense of relatedness with the other person such that trust can be built, communication can be stronger, conflict can be reduced, work can get done effectively.
Well, and you also understand what drives that person, right? You understand what's going on in their life, because that does impact work, right? So that you clearly understand where that person's coming from. I think that's part of what you're saying. I think
if you don't have that context for what's going on, someone's acting a little strange or different, but if you know that yesterday was the first day of kindergarten for their youngest or for their first or whatever. And now I'm not saying you can immediately assume, oh, that's because that person's got a kindergartner, but I'm saying that when you have and that's a very basic thing, I realize, but when you have a better sense of what's going on in people's lives and what matters to them, what are their values, what are the things that are important to them, what are their goals, the more of that you have, the more effective you can be to understand where they're at, why they are where they at, and how you can help them move forward.
Let me ask you that. I had a conversation yesterday, and it was an interesting one of the guests made an interesting point. She said that one of the things she recommends to her clients is that the leader or manager, the CEO, whatever, makes a point to go for a 20-minute or 30-minute walk or lunch or coffee or something with every employee. Do you think that undermines other management if you're pulling people from their teams to talk to them as CEO?
I think it depends on a bunch of factors, right? And I know no good consultant, every good consultant has to be able to say it depends. But I would say this: I think it depends a lot on the understanding and expectations between the CEO and those managers in between, right? So like the managers in between need to understand why the CEO is doing that, what the goals of that are. So I think it can be done in a way that ends up being a super positive thing all the way around, as opposed to something that feels like is undermining, jumping the channel and those sorts of things. I think if I'm the CEO, I think it's incumbent upon me to make sure that everybody, both the employee and that manager in the middle, understands what the goals of this are, what I'm trying to accomplish, so there aren't misunderstandings. And if I'm that manager in the middle, I think it's incumbent upon me, if I am not clear, to number one, assume positive intent, but number two, say, hey, what's going on? How can I support this? Is there something I should be aware of or concerned about or whatever? And chances are, if you've got a CEO who is committed to managing by wandering around, to use the Tom Peters phrase,
right.
Then and by the way, some of you aren't old enough. I can't imagine not knowing who Tom Peters is, but it's like you don't know who Peter Drucker is. But the point is, if a senior leader is committed to that, right, then odds are the intentions are good. I mean, odds are the intentions are good, right? But I think if you're that manager in the middle and you're worried about it, I think you just need to open the line of dialogue and have a conversation, because chances are it's all good as long as we're all on the same page.
Right. I think that's that was kind of my take too, is that there has to be good communication, and the CEO needs to communicate that to the managers, that's the reason, right?
Absolutely.
Is to find out.
And if you are that CEO and you didn't have that, you started doing this but didn't have that conversation, then you need to do it soon, right away. And if you're hearing this thinking, hey, I want to do that, then start there. Start with that conversation.
Well, actually start with those managers, right?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, they're part of the people you're going to have the meetings with, right? Have the coffees or the walks with. Absolutely.
Something else that comes up pretty frequently in my coaching and in these conversations is managing people remotely. I mean, I think this is gonna be one of the next biggest management challenges of. And you have a book.
The long distance leader. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Since you gave me a hard time about the other two, I just thought I'd show it.
You have to. I implore you to do. Props are excellent. And we'll give we'll put up links for all of those too, because I think these are all super relevant. But isn't that going to be one of the biggest challenges of management? I mean, kind of going forward. I mean, it's just managing teams that are all over the place, even for small. Even now, like I've got people all over the place, and it's a challenge to keep everybody on the same message.
Yeah. As my co-author Wayne Trammell says, if people are thinking about remote leadership or remote teams or virtual teams, whatever you want to call it, telework, the genie's out of the bottle. The trends read different research. More and more people are working remotely all the time. More and more people are working remotely part of the time, and that's not going to go back for a whole variety of reasons. There are cost reasons, the economic reasons from the organization's perspective. There are talent retention issues. There are work flexibility issues on the other side. There are all sorts of reasons why it's not going to go back to the quote good old days the way it once was. Now, I walk into office buildings and I walk into spots and see a bunch of empty cubicles, and that doesn't mean that they have too much space. It means that people are working from home 1 day a week, 2 days a week. They have the ability to work home on occasion. I had a coaching call with one of my clients just yesterday talking about how do we think about implementing this and how do I manage the implementation of that with our organization. So it's not going away. And what we like to talk about, Rhett, is that Leadership is leadership. It's been the same forever. People leading other people, helping other people make the decision to move towards a desirable goal. But there are things about it, the nuances that are different when we do it remotely are important. And if we leave those things out, ignore them, close our eyes and try to wish them away, we're not going to be very successful.
What are some, I guess, tools, tips, wisdom that you can share about managing remotely?
I think the first thing that I would say is, the single first thing I would say is that if you're leading a team that's remote, or that some of the members are remote, which we would call a hybrid team, which is what my team is, that you have to be far more intentional about everything. Because a lot of things that will happen somewhat naturally, or that you won't have to think about so much if everyone's around you, is definitely not the case when they're not. You have to be more intentional about when and how you communicate, when and how you're available for people. If you have a quote open door policy, it's pretty hard for people to see the open door if they're not down the hall, right? So there's a whole bunch of those things that we've got to be far more intentional about, because otherwise we will, absence does not make the heart grow fonder. Out of sight is often out of mind. And even if your team members aren't out of mind, they're going to feel that way if you're not intentionally working on it. So that's the first thing I would say is be more intentional. The second thing I would say is that beware the myths. And the biggest myth is how can I know what they're doing if they're not here? And the thing I would say there is, have you ever, when people ask me that question, I ask this question back. I said, have you ever worked the week between Christmas and New Year's? And what do people say? Oh yeah. I said, how does that go? They go, oh my gosh, I am so productive. I get so much done. Well, why is that? Well, because there's no one around. I mean, I can focus. I said, that's your remote team members every day. The myth is that people don't get anything done. The reality is, depending on the kind of work, they're actually far more productive. The problem is not that they don't get work done. The problem isn't that they go check their laundry. I don't care, because why would I care about activity when I really want to care about accomplishment, number one. But the second thing is, while they can get a lot done, they often become very insular and very inwardly focused on just their work. So we have huge opportunities to build a more engaged remote team and help people see that there's more to the work than just their work that's right in front of them on their laptop. There's just a couple of things.
Are there some tools? I mean, I don't know, Slack or any of these programs that you see as effective in terms of managing sort of that kind of work?
Well, tools are tools. I said that I own a farm, and so on my farm, I probably have 15 hammers.
I'm going to like this analogy.
Right? I mean, I got all kinds of hammers, right? But not every hammer, just because I got them, doesn't mean I got to know which tool to use at the right time to get the right result. And so we actually use Slack, as it turns out. In your organizations, as you're watching us, you're using some sort of instant messaging tool of some sort. Doesn't really matter which one it is. But you've also got a webinar tool, and you've also got email, and you've also got conference lines, and you got all this other stuff. And you got file sharing, you got all kinds of stuff, collaboration tools of all sorts. The challenge here is not trying to find a new tool. The challenge is, let's use the right tools for the right purposes, and let's make sure that everyone's using them effectively. Because the thing is, what our software vendors have done is they've tried to add features, right? And so there's a lot of things that you could do a lot of different ways. The real question is, let's just use the right tools for the right situation, and let's make sure that we know how to use the tools we've got. What oftentimes people do is they go buy another tool rather than really making sure people know how to use in real life the tools that they already have. And I can tell you that when we added Slack, for example, several years ago, I had some team members of the team that wanted to try it, some other members of the team that were skeptical. Not uncommon, perfectly fine. Right. And what we learned is that once we were very clear about when and how we use that tool versus email, then it became powerful, and we became better at both. Then when we just adding something in is not the answer at all. But if you have a business need and you think about how we can intelligently deal with that, one of these kind of tools could be very helpful.
How was the onboarding of that? Was it painful? How did you do it?
Well, we didn't know what we didn't know when we started, right? So we sort of said, let's try it and see. I will give you a couple of tips about what specifically what we did, but I can tell you how we onboard people now. Is that we're very clear about the expectations of when you would use this and when you would use something else. Okay. So for the most part, if you're going to write a paragraph or more, send an email, because it doesn't work very well for the shorter stuff, right? We have expectations around people being able to use the tool to say, hey, I'm out. I have a big belief in our team about everyone being able to protect their productivity, which means if I'm going to go write for 2 hours, right, I'm going to tell everybody, don't talk to me for 2 hours. But everyone else can do the same thing. Working on a project, migrating this data, don't talk to me for 2 hours. They can put that in Slack because they can get way more done, get rid of the multitasking, get rid of the distractions, get rid of the squirrels, and they can get more done. But then they can use Slack to say, not available right now. So people know they can still send them a note. They're not going to get the notification. They can say up front, hey, next 2 hours, I'm heads down. And so then people aren't worried or wondering, why are they not responding to my Slack? Because they've talked about that. We use, and Slack isn't the only one where this is the case, where you can have channels, or you can call other things, or you can have conversations for smaller groups. I'll give you one thing that we found very, very, very useful. One is that we have a channel called the water cooler. Okay. Water cooler channel is, I'm going to go there right now, see if there's anything there that I could actually share with the world here. The water cooler channel is, we have a general channel, stuff that people might need to know. The water cooler channel is like the stuff you would talk about around the water cooler, right? Yesterday, I shared with people a word of the day. I just happened to put it in there. It didn't have nothing to do with work. I just decided to share it there. If someone's wanting to share something about their family that they would normally talk about in the hallways, we don't have a hallway. They can share that kind of stuff there. And here's the, I won't read the whole thing, but something last week, someone said, you may begin to rejoice with me about this, ... not about business, about something that people want to share, about building those relationships and maintaining those relationships across time and space when we're not all together. So I think having a space like that makes it safe to talk about the non-work stuff, and and as importantly, so that's saying that that's important to us. But the other thing is, it doesn't get mixed into another channel where it becomes frustrating or challenging, or things get lost, et cetera, et cetera. So
that's where you can wish people happy birthdays and
absolutely, that's where that stuff goes. Someone's anniversary, happy birthdays, all those kinds of things.
Right, yep. And everybody sees it, and everybody chimes in, and it makes people feel good, right? Exactly
right. So here's an example, though. I had one today that my wife and I are going to Michigan. When we come home from Michigan, we'll bring back peaches. So I want to let everybody on the team that lives in Indianapolis know that if they want some peaches, they need to let me know, put in their order, and for which I'm happy to bring them peaches, right? But here's the thing. Not everyone on the team is in Indianapolis. So I don't put that in Slack, because half the people are going to say, well, great, I can't get any damn peaches because I don't live in Indianapolis. Or, so I don't want to create any of that kind of stuff. And it's irrelevant to those people. It's relevant to a few. I sent it in an email because that was the quickest way to narrow down the focus to just the right people, as opposed to doing it in Slack. Just a silly, simple example. So far, I have orders for 7 peaches, if anyone cares.
My peaches in South Carolina are better than your peaches in Michigan. I'll put my peaches up against yours any day. What's that?
We'll agree to disagree on that.
Fair enough. I'm teasing, by the way. Not about the peaches. You talk about, as leaders, we should look closer. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's probably lots of things. I mean, I don't know specifically where you pulled that from, but here's what I can say. I think there's a lot of things we need to look at more closely. I think that as leaders, we'd be well served to be far more observant. Right? We need to look closer at what's being said, as well as what's not being said on the team. We need to look closer at what people's attitudes and energy looks like. We need to look closer at what's going on with the relationships across the team. We need to look closer at our industry and the trends. I mean, so I can say inward things, or I can say outward things, right? But I think that, leaders at all levels they've got full plates. Mm-hmm. Most would say, well, my plate is over full. Right. And I'm very cautiously not using that 4-letter word that starts with a B and ends with a Y called busy. But we have, which I think is a 4-letter word. We could talk about that. If you want. Here's the thing. Our plates are full, and too often we end up in the urgent and not the important. So we have to be the ones that are intentionally looking closer at the things that matter most to our businesses and to our teams and to the relationships on our teams. And so, being observant is incredibly valuable for us as leaders. And I think people forget that or ignore that or say, I'm too busy to think about all that kind of stuff. And I got this work to do. And we got to get past that. We got to get, again, out of accomplishment and into accomplishment. Out of activity and into accomplishment.
I think you were talking about it, and when I was looking at that, was that often things from afar look pretty, right? They look successful, they look clean, they look good, but when you dig down, that's when you find the things that need work, right?
Well, I get on a lot of airplanes, and I try to always sit on a window. I like the window seat, always have. And I try to take at least a little bit of time, if it's not cloudy, to have that window open and looking out. And again, from a long distance, it looks great, right? From the plane's eye view, awesome. From the bird's eye view, maybe even pretty good. But from the worm's eye view, there's a different view, right? It's kind of what I call the undercover boss syndrome, right? Bosses, senior leaders spend time and money and put on fake mustaches and all this makeup and just to find out what's really going on in the organization, because people won't tell them. So looking closer can be making sure you're finding that stuff out, spending time on the shop floor, spending time talking to customers. Looking closer can look like that too, because we're going to find messes. But as long as we're talking about that part, let me say this too. If we build the right relationships with our team, we build the right kind of culture, we won't have to be the only one looking. If people are comfortable to bring that to us, we're doing our job as leader too.
I want to switch gears a little bit and again ask people on social media and who are watching to ask questions. Rufat Abazov, thank you for joining us today. He says, "Great story, Kevin. Thank you." I want to switch gears over to your group, your firm does a lot of training and a lot of seminars and a lot of teaching, and I want to know what your take on this is. I feel like we spend lots of money as business to train people, to send them to seminars and get certifications and all that. But then they come back to work the following Monday and we get them hooked right back into the busyness, the 4-letter word, back into the grind. And a week later, that's all forgotten, right? That big binder, that big notebook sits up there on the corner of the desk, and that's that.
Never to be opened again.
Yes. and to me, that's just a shame, right? Because we're not utilizing whoever got the advantage of going to that seminar or that conference or whatever it was. It isn't sharing that knowledge with everybody else.
Well, there's a couple of things about it. One of the best ways to learn something is to teach it, right? So if you will come back to your point and you will share key ideas or a key idea with someone else, it is now yours as opposed to being the thing you heard from the guy from Indianapolis, right? So that simple thing in and of itself. But I think there's a bigger, I think where you're really headed is you sent me off for 3 days or for 1 day or whatever it is to learn some stuff, and I come back, and if I don't change my behavior, what was the point, right? So there's learning it and having the knowledge, which is fine, but the problem is what we really want is behavior change. What we really want is action, right? And so we say all the time that training is an event, but learning is a process, and too much of what we're doing is event stuff and not process stuff. So we actually spend a lot of time on this and have we have a product that we're very proud of called The Remarkable Way, which will be open again in October. If you want to learn more about it, go to kevineikenberry.com/way and you can get on a list. But here's how it works. It's about one skill at a time, 1 month at a time, blended learning. So you're getting content in a variety of different ways. You don't go off to a workshop for a day or two. You get some content that's designed to be integrated into your work. Because if I'm a leader, working and leading all day long, right? And so if I get some new ideas that I can say, now this month I'm going to work on getting better at this thing, and then I can apply that as I go, I got a much better shot, right? So, but if you've gone to a workshop, there are three things. I think most workshops are mostly all about skill set. I believe we got to get mindset right in front of skill set, but that at the end, what we really want is habit set, which is the word that I made up so they all match. But it's really like, how do you change the habit when you get back so you get something to actually happen? So if you are the person that's going to a workshop and you want to do a better job of implementing it when you get back, come back with no more than 3 things that you want to do and have a very specific thing that you're going to do starting on day 1. Not like this big thing. I want to be a better listener. I'm going to apply those 12 keys to listening, but you're going to say, on Monday, I'm going to ask more questions, right? And for a week, all I'm going to do is focus on, I'm going to ask more questions. I'm going to ask more questions. Because if I'm asking more questions, chances are I'll be a better listener. I mean, I'm just using that as a very sort of simple example. Now, if you're the leader that's sending people to training, whether it's other managers or leaders or whether it's your team, a couple of things that you can do. Number one, don't send someone without having a conversation up front about what your expectations are of them and why they're going. And even if they asked to go and, like they instigated it, let's talk about before you go so that when you go, you can be successful. And then when they get back, you need to meet with them and talk about, okay, what is your action plan? And how can I support you in doing that? And so now I know what feedback to give you or not based on the things that you're working on right now. So all about process, Rhett. Process, not event.
Should there be an expectation to share the experience with the rest of the team, or does that lead to people feeling like they didn't get an opportunity? Or
I think it all depends on what it is, right? So if you're a leader and you went to some sort of leadership, coaching, communication skills workshop kind of thing, what I always tell people when you go back, if you have an action plan that includes things that impact your team, which chances are you will have, share some of that. Like, hey team, I was at this training, and one of the things that we learned about was listening. I'll just stay with that example. And so my goal now is to, over the next month, is to work on being a better listener. And I'm going to start by trying to ask more questions and make less statements.
Right.
And as we're meeting, I'd like your feedback. So now I've got an accountability loop. I've got a feedback loop. And what else am I doing? What am I saying to my team? Hey, training is important. And when you come back, you need to take action. So now, if you work for me, when you go to training, you should not be surprised if I ask.
Right.
So I'm creating.
Does
that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That's a.
To the other part of your point, which is 2 people get to go to a conference, right? No one else gets to go. Should they share? I think that they should share some key learnings, but not talk about all the great bars we went to and they had this great food on Tuesday night at the thing, but seriously, like, here are the 5 things that I learned that I think apply to our business, or here are the things I thought were really cool. And hey, Joanne, I really thought you'd appreciate this, and so I brought this back for you, kind of thing. So that, and if everyone knows that whenever people go, that's what happens when they come back from the conference-y thing, then I think that over time you shouldn't have too big of issues with that. And again, if everyone understands why we're doing it, right?
Right. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that that's really good advice. Another sort of switching gears is performance reviews. We talk a lot about these nowadays, and I'm working with a company now, and they spend upwards of 2 or 3 weeks of a year working on writing up their performance reviews, and the employee has a piece, and the boss has a piece, and then another layer of management has a piece, and it's just. And my advice to them is just scrap it all. What's your take on performance reviews?
Well, there's a lot, I've been at this a long time. You mentioned it earlier, right? And here's what I see is it's like a lot of things. It's like the pendulum, right? right now the pendulum is swinging toward get rid of it all, throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And what'll eventually happen is it'll start to come back the other way at least a little bit. Here's what I think the problems are with performance reviews. Number one is it's all focused. The time horizon is wrong.
Okay.
The performance reviews are all about the past, and what can you change about the past? Should we reflect? Absolutely. But we should we should use the past as a prelude to the future. So we should have a conversation. Should we be having conversations about people's performance and how they're doing? Yes. Do we need the form? Maybe. Do we need the next level of management in it? Probably not. So I mean, it all depends on what people have got. The other thing is most people call it performance management, and no one wants to be managed. Right. So I think most people's experience and culture says that, no one looks forward to their performance review. It's not a good day. Even if I got a good review, most people don't love them. I think what we need to be doing is we need to be talking far more often about performance. We have to have far clearer expectations, and we should be managing the conversation about a time horizon that's wider than just what's already happened, so that it isn't just a history lesson. Because most people didn't like history in school, but one of the reasons they didn't like history in school is there's nothing you can do about it. So what we need to do is talk about, okay, so here's where we are, but here's where we want to be. And what do we need to do now, knowing where we've been, to get where we want to go? And the thing is, even if their performance is sort of below the standard, if we only do this once a year, or even, sort of best case, people are doing it once a quarter. Like, I could be working for 3 months and not doing something well and not know that until we have this meeting. And in more cases, it's a year. Like, why didn't you tell me this in January instead of in August?
Right. Now I feel awful. Right.
If we're having regular one-on-one conversations that include coaching and include this conversation, we should be getting some regular progress. And even after a year, even if the person didn't get all the way where you want, you got the right trend, and you can have a conversation about success as well as next steps. And if they're really not making any progress, we're in a much faster ability to say, hey, wrong person, wrong job, wrong time for you in this job, you need to go, whatever, right? So I just think that we make it let's go back to what we already said, we make it an event rather than a process. Should we have a process and an ongoing conversation about performance? Yes. Should we be helping people be successful? Yes. Should we be correcting them if it's not going so well?
Yes.
Yes. For their benefit, for the team's benefit, for your benefit as a leader, for the organization's benefit, for everyone's benefit. Doing it once a year, in many cases, isn't working. So scrapping it is fine, but what are we going to do instead? And that is much more consistent, ongoing coaching and feedback.
Somebody, I can't remember where I heard this. It was either Marshall Goldsmith or Lance Secretan. I was having a conversation with, and they sort of said something to the effect that, you don't sit down with your spouse once a year and say, honey, it's time for your performance review,
Well, not, tomorrow I will be married 33 years. And I think if that's the way we did it, we probably wouldn't be looking at 33 years.
Right. So
pretty likely.
So that, yeah, I agree with you. There's got to be a process, but maybe it's more ongoing than it is this event. I like the way you put that in terms of we make it an event, and it really shouldn't be, right? People.
Well, and think about it this way: it's not about the form, and it's not right. It's not about it. Another mistake that managers and leaders make is that they make it about, I got to get all these done in the next 2 weeks because HR's on my back and I got to get these done. And then it all becomes about the wrong thing, which is getting the paper or online form filled out. Can't be about that. The other thing is, if we wait that long, then it's all these surprises. There should never be a surprise in a performance review. If there is, you're doing it wrong. You're not having enough conversations.
That's a great place to leave that conversation, I think. How do you give, in your experience, what's the best way to give feedback, positive or negative? But I know we all struggle with how do you give somebody that negative feedback?
Well, I'm looking at the clock, and I know we don't have all day, so I'm gonna say that a counterintuitive thing. The best way to give feedback is to not start by giving any. The best way to give feedback is to start by asking them. So, Rhett, how did that go? Now, this does not mean that I shouldn't be prepared. right? So like that's not the context of this situation. But let's say that I was going to give you feedback on this show, right? This does not mean that I shouldn't be prepared with what I observed, what I noticed, etc. But what I should do instead is start with you. What did you see? What do you think? What worked for you? Why? Because here's the thing. We give feedback, or we want feedback to happen because we want the person to hear it, think about it, and perhaps take action on it and apply it. But if the other person is in this defensive spot, that ain't going to happen. It's not even going to get through. So if we start with what did you think, then I can either agree or disagree with that. But chances are, if you got the kind of relationship with the person where when you ask, they share some things, chances are some of the stuff that you had written down is stuff that they're going to say. There is no chance for defensiveness now. Here's the thing. People don't argue, Rhett, with their own data. So what I'm trying to do is create a conversation about how it's going. This does not mean that we all have blind spots. You might not say it. I might need to talk about it, but I've got a much better position. I come from a much better place of having what I've got to add to that to be heard. If I start by asking you what you think, whose performance is it? Yours. Who's going to have to change it? You. Who needs to take action on it at the end? You. Why should I do all the talking?
Right. Well, and you also probably get some valuable feedback in that, right? If you just shut up and listen for a minute.
Well, here's the thing. I might hear that Rhett says, "Well, I'm the best interviewer since Barbara Walters," to which I may or may not agree, right? But at least then I would know that's where you're at.
That's right.
But I also, and more likely would hear, "Oh, I didn't think it went very well at all," and then you sort of go down this whole path. And then my job is to sort of say, "Well, time out." Right. You did a lot of things really well. Here's some things that you're not seeing or you're not noticing, or it's not near. Keep people from catastrophizing. Right.
I like that word.
I don't know if it's a word, but I use it.
So the last question I always ask people is, what's the best advice you ever got, and from who?
Well, anytime someone asks what's the best, it makes me think of like, if you'd only take one book to the desert island, what would you take? Like that's an impossible question, right? It's an impossible question, but I'll just say the first thing that came to my mind. We were talking about relationships today. We talked about marriage just a couple of minutes ago. The first thing that came to my mind was something I learned from my dad, which was, when you love people, tell them that you love them. Don't forget to tell them all the time, tell them regularly. I think, by the way, that applies to more than just our personal life. I think it relates to our life as a leader as well. So there's the first one that came to my mind. Best, I don't know. Highly valuable,
Yeah.
For sure.
I think that's probably the best, because that's the most important, isn't it? Everything else is important, but not as important as the people you love.
Yep.
Yep.
So that's what you got.
Hey, I'll take it. I think that I can go with that. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. This has been fun. We need to do this more regularly. And thank you for joining us on the Power Lunch here on LinkedIn Live. You are why we do the show. So thank you for spending your lunchtime or your afternoon with us. And anyway, if you like the show, again, give it a like or share so others can benefit. If you'd like us to broadcast live from your event or from your conference, we would be happy to do it. We'd love to make that happen. So get in touch with us via the website or via direct message on LinkedIn. The website is powerlunch.live. Tomorrow, we've got Ben Angel. That is going to be a fun conversation. And so don't miss it, 12 noon here on LinkedIn, on the LinkedIn channel. You can find the broadcast at hashtag PowerLunch Live or hashtag LinkedIn Live. That's the best way to find the rebroadcast of this anytime you want to go back and watch it. Anyway, thank you for spending your afternoon, Kevin. Thank you for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I will ask you this: where can people find? I know you said the website earlier. One more time for people.
Let me give you some place people can go. You can go to. We have a short process for being a more effective leader called 13 Days to Remarkable Leadership. KevinEikenberry.com 13 days. 13 days. KevinEikenberry.com/13 days.
All right, man. Thank you. And you guys have a good